Welcome everybody to another celebration of the 40th anniversary of Knightriders. I am Matt Blasi, I'm co-host of the GARF Network.
And I am Eric Schiff, the other co-host of the GARF Network. Thank you everybody for showing up.
Yes, thank you all for coming. So if anybody had watched the GARF Network in the spring, we did a very intensive month-long Knightriders celebration. The film turned 40, and it was one of the most fun times Eric and I had on the show. We're here to do some more with some folks that we had on before. Taso and Marty have been guests of the show before, but we also have some new folks. So what I'd like to do is go down the line and have you guys introduce yourself.
Taso, Stavrakis.
Great.
Gary Lahti.
Marty, Schiff.
I'm Albert Amerson.
Keisel.
Well, thank you guys so very much for coming up here to talk about Knightriders. It's definitely got a second life the last couple of years, and it's amazing talking to everybody, and I'm sure this will be repeated, but the central theme is it was the greatest summer vacation a lot of folks have. It wasn't like making a movie. So I wanted to start, Gary, we haven't really heard from you in terms of Knightriders before, so could you give us a little background as to how you got started on the project and a little bit about that summer?
Yeah. Well, I was an actor in New York, and my agent, Jeff Hunter, called and said, I got this movie, you want to read the script? And I said, sure, so I read it, and went nights on motorcycles, but I don't get it. Who's this director? And he said, George Romero. And I said, who's George Romero? I was very young. And he said, well, he's done a bunch of horror films. He did Night of the Living Dead and so forth. And I went like, I had gone to a conservatory. I went, I don't do horror, it's sort of very like that. So I read the script and I went, it's kind of interesting. He said, go to the audition. So I did whatever he said in those days. I went to the audition and I read with Chris Forrest, who was George's wife at the time, that I did not know. And I read the scene, there's a scene in it where I'm trying to pick up Patty Tallman's character in the movie. So I'm reading the scene with Christine, and I laid it on really thick. And I didn't know, and I left the audition, never thought about it again. And about a month later, I was skiing in Vermont, and they called me and they said, we'd like to offer you the role. And I thought, I almost kind of remember, usually you go through a callback and a screen test and all that before they give you a role. And I went, okay, I called my agent, and that's when the whole thing happened. And that was probably at the end of March, beginning of April, and then they started shooting the film beginning of May, I think it was. The leaves were on the tree, so that's kind of how the whole thing unfolded.
Albert, same question. How did you hear of Knightriders and become involved with the film?
Well, I was working for WQED as an intern, and then I ended up working for Channel 18 up right here in Monroeville, which I don't know if it still exists or not. And a lady who used to work for QED had remembered me, and George was looking for a real Native American, so here I am. And that's how I got the job. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, most of the people were really wonderful. And it was a good time. I mean, that's about all I can really say about it.
Trudy, you were in Dawn of the Dead with George. How did you get involved with Knightriders?
I was in Dawn of the Dead with George. And I was kind of left over, and they called me up and they said, you want to do another movie? I said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. I did another movie. That was it. And they called me up, they told me where to go, and I can't for the life of me remember where we filmed. I think it was, I know it was a strip mine somewhere down in New Kensington, somewhere in that. I know I ran down 28, but I can't remember exactly where. I couldn't find it again if you paid me. And that was it. And so I just went, and they told me where to go, what to do, and that's what I did.
Ken, can you talk a little bit about how you got involved first heard about the film?
Well, in a really, really roundabout way, kind of through a back door. I was working at a place in downtown Pittsburgh called the Warner Theater, if anybody remembers the Warner, most beautiful movie theater I've ever seen in my life. And the general manager of the Warner was a fellow named Larry Winterseller, and he also happened to be the owner of a thing called Mayer's Costume Shop, which used to be on Forbes Avenue, just a little bit east of Duquesne University. And I come in one night to usher, and he says, "You're getting ready to be off of school right now." I'm like, "Yeah, I was 16 at the time." He says, "Could you spend a weekend at the costume shop helping me make 90 medieval outfits for a movie?" And I thought, well, and he says, "I'll tell you what, if you do that, you can have the Dawn of the Dead costume that you've been asking me about for the last 6 months." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, I think I can do this." And so I showed up. We started on a Saturday morning at about 9 a.m. We had to make 50 men's tunics and 40 women's panel dresses. And we had a woman from the SCA, if anybody knows what the SCA is. We had a woman here in Pittsburgh who was in charge of GARF for the local SCA chapter. And we had Larry, and we had another guy named Greg. And I did all the cutting of the materials. I couldn't sew to save my life. And Greg pinned it, and then Larry and Sue actually did all the sewing. And we stayed up, had pizza, and stayed up pretty much all night sewing. Over the next 2 days, we knocked out all 90 outfits. And then he asked me, he said, "Would you like to be coming up to the movie set in the van, and you and I will stay on set and sew any tears or seams that, anything that happens to the costumes." And he says, "I'll give you another costume from Dawn of the Dead for every 4 days that you work on set." So I thought, okay, well, I'll do that. And so I ended up there at the shooting. And I was there about 2 weeks and earned myself 2 costumes before the payroll person came up and said, how much is Larry paying you to be here? And I said, well, I'm on my 2nd costume, getting ready my 3rd one. And she's like, "Oh, no. And I thought I was off the set for good then. And then she went and got a hold of Larry, and she got a hold of George. And it turns out that George asked her to keep me on the set, but they put me over to be part of Laurel, and I ended up being in the crowd scenes and holding reflectors, and generally, you can see me quite a few times in the crowds and in the line waiting for hot dogs and stuff.
Taso, you were a George collaborator at this point. How did your involvement with Knightriders begin?
I don't remember. Remember. We had done already Dawn of the Dead. Did we do Day of the Dead? We haven't done Day of the Dead yet. So Dawn of the Dead, Knightriders, Day of the Dead? Creep Show. I wasn't in Creep Show. I did Creep Show 2. So yeah, it all blends together so wonderfully in my mind. I don't remember how I got started. I know I had already done a Renaissance Festival. So George asked me about jousting, and I could tell him all about horseback jousting. He said, "We're going to do it on motorcycles." I said, "We'll have to use the other hand. Horseback jousting, you use your right hand. Motorcycles, you have to throttle with your right hand. So joust with your left hand," which was interesting to change sides. That was the only difference I knew of. So yeah, he offered me a part, but not just doing the stunts and special effects, and an actual acting part, which was fun. And it was my 23rd birthday on the set. So after that, everything is a blur. It was a great birthday.
And Marty, you were also a collaborator with George. You worked on Dawn of the Dead. How did you get involved with Knightriders?
So for me, George was in LA. I was living in LA at the time. George came to LA to cast Knightriders, and he called me directly and said, "Hey man, I'm doing a movie. I want you to audition for it. And we're going to be meeting at the Westwood Marquee or one of the Westwood hotels." He said, "Come in 1 o'clock on tomorrow." And so I got ready for this audition. I didn't have a script or anything, and I'm thinking, I guess I'm just gonna do a cold reading or wing it or whatever it was. I walked into the room for the audition. George gave me a big hug. He said, grow a beard and be back in Pittsburgh in May. And that was my audition for Knightriders. So I was cast basically, if you look at the cast of Dawn of the Dead and you look at the cast of Knightriders, it's very similar. I mean, it was like really a big reunion of the cast, but many of us were carryovers from Knightriders. I mean, from Dawn of the Dead into Knightriders. So my audition was just a big hug from George, and that was it. I grew a beard, and I was back in Pittsburgh by May.
Gary, what kind of prep did you have to go into when you got to set? Fighting, motorcycle riding, what was that like?
That's a good question. Because I had training, not only I went to got a Master of Fine Arts at University of Minnesota, and part of your training there was stage combat, which included all manner of weapons, swords, broadswords, fencing, fisticuffs, all that, including choreography, fight choreography. So I had a background using weapons to start with. Also, I was a country kid and grew up with dirt bikes. So I was very familiar with motorcycles and riding my whole life since I was a little kid. So it kind of went together. The only thing I learned when I got to the set was anytime there was anything that involved a weapon, somebody else did it. They had stuntmen to do all that, and I never touched a weapon. I liked watching the stunt guys do what they did, which to me was unbelievable. And I never had it. I don't think I ever hit anybody. I don't think I fell down. There was nothing dangerous that ever happened to me on that set. It was somebody else who did it. So it was wasted training, other than the motorcycles, which I still ride. So that was really the only prep for that part of it there was. The rest was just being an actor, my actor training.
Albert, I imagine there was not much in regards to dialogue for your character. I was curious, did George share any direction with you?
They just said that it wasn't in my contract, and it wasn't in the budget mainly, so I became the perpetual silent Indian in the movie, and that was pretty much it. I had a martial arts background, so that kind of helped me over a little bit, and I choreographed the fight scene in the restaurant with the sheriff. That was pretty much it.
Trudy, with the motorcycles, what were some of your day-to-day activities or duties?
Well, I use my own bike. Most of them use their little, I call them and I had a Honda 350 and I ride my own, and I kept it there every day. And first thing, of course, you get the bikes down on the trailer. They had a big tractor trailer that they kept them in. And then they tell us what they want us to do. And we were in a grab pit. And that was the hard part, was physically to ride on gravel. Any of you ever ridden a motorcycle, you hit gravel, you're going down. But this is solid gravel, so you're constantly fighting to keep the bike from dropping. So you basically just rode around in circles and did nasty gestures to the people on the sidelines and to each other and tried to keep from killing each other. So there were a couple different things that they had me do. Sadly, everything that I was in got cut. I saw the movie and I'm like, I know what I look like and I know what I wore, but they cut everything. And they said, well, a lot of it wasn't filmed. So, and there was a lot of dust, and that was a big problem with it. So that was the problem. But basically, it was just them, giving us instruction and, the hard work of it. And the funny part, just, you may not know this or not, but I was an actor before I used to do all this motorcycle stuff. And I was auditioning that season for Civic Light Opera. And so I went right from the film, and my hair was long at the time. like a beast. They had a scar from here all the way down the Prospect Road, a scar down my arm, and I was filthy. I mean, I was riding in this filthy gravel. It was absolutely did look like a beast. Hair was like crazy. And I had to leave right away because my audition was at 6 o'clock. So I left the bike there, went straight to the audition at the CLO, and I went in and sat down next to people, and they would go, I'm on a movie, I'm working, you know. And they told me, don't, when you go in, stand on your mark, give your music to the pianist, don't talk to anybody, stand on your mark, they'll tell you when to sing and when to shut up. So I opened the door and did everything that they told me not to do. So I said, I don't usually look like this. I'm in a movie set right now, and I'm a motorcycle stunt driver in this movie, and I'm not a dirtball on my scars. They're like, oh, okay, come on in. And when I went in, they started to laugh. And I knew the piano player, and I said, sweet baby James, here's my... And I just did everything wrong, but I got to do Pacific Light Opera that year, so it worked out well. But it was fun. It was a fun movie to make. Everybody was very supportive. You know what I mean? It was like nobody tried to be a hot dog. Nobody tried to upstage anybody or get anybody else's way or try to get into the camera. You know, everybody was very polite, very nice, and very helpful to each other. It was a good experience.
And in doing these 40th anniversary shows, we've heard a lot about the camaraderie experienced by the cast and crew, and a lot of that seems to revolve around your experiences at the Ramada Hotel. Apparently there's a lot of stuff going down there that may or may not be able to be shared on the stage, but I was curious, and I'll start with you, Gary. Do you recall any of that, any of those activities?
Why me? Why me? Ask Taco. What's going on?
We can start with Marty. I know he's got a
Let's
few.
start with Marty's a good one.
Marty can sing the Ramada song.
Well, there was, we were perfect angels.
Oh, yeah.
We were in bed by 8 o'clock every night, sober, and up and ready to work at 6 in the morning, just like good farmers. That's exactly everything I remember.
That was all true. All true.
You know, we had some fun. We were trapped in a Ramada Inn for 5 months, and there was a lot of rain that summer. As a matter of fact, the set had gotten destroyed by a microburst, and we had to just stay in the hotel for, I guess, about a week while they rebuilt the set. And then, of course, you take 40 creative people and you keep them captive in a Ramada where all you have is a bar and a pool, and a lot of fun can, happen. So we organized things like the Ramada Regatta, where there was a little hobby shop next to the Ramada Inn, and this hobby shop never made more money in its entire history. We all went over there and bought every model boat they had, and we built these little model boats in our hotel rooms, and then we drank around the pool and floated our boats in the pool, and that was the Ramada Regatta. We did that. We also had the on-location heirs disease vaccination, which was basically coming to my room and doing 2 shots of bourbon. That was the vaccination for that. A lot more fun than the COVID vaccination. But, so we were just like thinking, how can we pass the time? But we went and bought pellet guns. Taso, did you have one of the pellet guns?
I didn't have the pellet gun. We were buying fireworks, bottle rockets, and then me and Savini got these laser guns. We had helmets and laser guns.
Yes.
And we were tracking people through the hotel.
Yeah.
And sneak up on them and then blast them with the laser.
We had pellet guns and laser guns. So we would take cups and dishes and bowls and any kind of dishware we could get, and we would put it outside my hotel room on the hill outside my room, and we would sit there at 8 o'clock in the morning after breakfast, and it was raining, so we would drink more bourbon and shoot these dishes and things with these pellet guns. I mean, we always just got creative and figured out things to do. We set up Taso one time. We took all the furniture from the lobby of the Ramada, and we put it in an elevator, and we had Taso sit in there and read the newspaper. And so when people would call the elevator, it would open up, and there'd be Taso sitting in a chair like this, reading the newspaper. That's just some of the stuff that we did. I mean, we were there for months and months.
We were there for months. So I'll have to say I was the first one. We had a regular hotel room with 2 beds. I realized I'm in here for months. I took one of my beds apart and put it in the hallway. And they very politely, without saying anything, they took it away. And then everybody realized, well, shit, I'm taking my bed out. And so everybody had their beds in the hallway, and the management got pissed at that point. And what they did, they took it all away, so we all had much bigger rooms at that point, where we could have parties and not have to trip over the beds.
There was some partying that went on.
There was a few,
just a
there
little
was a few
bit of partying. Wouldn't you say so, Albert? Yeah. That you can remember.
When the parties got too big, they just went into the hall.
Right.
We had 2 floors. We had the entire bottom floor and the entire top floor of the hotel. So they had other people coming in for a night at a time in the middle, which was a big mistake because there was always something going on the other 2 floors. So everybody else was tortured.
My parents.
Or did they? Were
My
they there?
parents came, and I said, look, put them on the 2nd floor. And because my mother said, no, you want to be on your floor, on the 3rd floor. So that's where they went and went, oh, no. And I remember Gary, Freddie Heights, we were stuntmen, looking out, I heard something going by my door, and it was him on a
motorized skateboard, right?
Going down the hall, and I was like, oh, this is not good. This is really not good. A lot of the other thing is, it wasn't just the cast that's here that was there. It was stunt guys. And if you think these guys are crazy, these guys are out of their minds. So you had a group of people who were 25 to 30 years old, 32 maybe, all jammed together with raging hormones in one place with nothing to do but drink and have fun and make a movie. Now, that being said, I must say that I never saw anybody be messed up. If you had to shoot the night before, you cleaned up your act and you showed up on the set ready to go. It was absolutely professional. There was no hijinks on the set at all, other than what was happening at the Ramada. Ramada was the best summer camp that I could possibly imagine. So it was probably the most fun summer. My wife's not here, so I can say that.
Gary, where was George while all this was going on?
Well, that's a good question, because I kept waiting for reprimand. I kept waiting for somebody to get arrested, for somebody to get kicked out of the hotel, somebody to get fired, because there was a lot of really irreverent things happening on a relationship level too, and it never did. It never did. So, but there was always like the sword of Damocles hanging over your head, waiting for that thing to come down. It just never happened.
But was George staying at the same hotel?
Yeah, George was there. He was cool. Everybody, Richard Rubenstein, the producer, was there. He was cool. Nobody said anything. Nobody said boo. You guys, did anybody ever say anything?
I thought they were in a different hotel.
They disappeared. Nobody home.
There wasn't a different hotel. That was it.
I think they were encouraging us a little bit, because what the partying we were doing, I think that feeling of togetherness and fun translated into the film itself. So I think it was probably calculated on a certain level.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
They were smarter than us.
When it stopped raining, I found a little spot out behind the hotel in the woods. So after it stopped raining, I don't know if you remember Taso and Patty Tallman and a couple other people. We just went out and started a fire. It took a hell of a long time to get the fire started because it was raining most of the time. But it dried out and we kind of had a nice evening, away from all the craziness.
Campfire in the woods behind the Ramada. At least we didn't start the campfire in the hall.
Yeah, and, we didn't burn the place down.
Right, and use the furniture. We could have.
Ken, since the movie was very stunt heavy and you were helping to create the costumes, did that provide any problems for you to keep the costumes looking good, or did you help distress them? Talk about that a little bit.
Well, the arrangement that George had made with Larry went back to the Crazies, when Mayors supplied the Army outfits for the Crazies. And George was a very shrewd businessman, and Larry was a very shrewd businessman. And the arrangement they had worked out was that they would go in halves on the cost of the material for the costumes, and then Larry and I would maintain the outfits on set, the ones that we had made. And then at the end of the shoot, Larry would get ownership of the outfits as rental outfits for the costume shop. So our job there was to make sure that the costume stayed more or less in one piece so that Larry could claim them later on, and that they were, kept in shape for use during the movie. And they were not well made by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, heck, we were a bunch of amateurs really doing this, but they were all very similar looking. So it was very easy to keep them repaired. And people would come up with a split seam or a split hem. The biggest problem we dealt with was the mud. And we couldn't do a thing about that. If somebody came up and they had a split seam and that thing was caked with mud, we would let us take it, launder it tonight, we'll fix it after we clean it, and we'll bring it back to the set. In the meantime, here's another one just like it, because we had plenty of spares. But I want to say that George did something during Knightriders, which is one of the nicest things that anybody ever did for me. When I was sitting in the back of the van one day working on some costumes, he comes walking up with a sandwich, and he sits down with me, because we were kind of out in the parking lot. We were kind of away from things. And he says, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Upper St. Clair. And I don't know if anybody from Pittsburgh here. Upper St. Clair is a nice area. And he goes, oh, hell. He says, I was expecting you to say you're from Braddock or something. And I was going to tell you my sob story about growing up in the slums of Philadelphia and sympathize with you. And I'm like, he says, all right, well, where do you go to school? And I said, I go to St. LaSalle, which is a Catholic school in Dormont. And he says, how do you like it? And I said, I hate it. And he says, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do when you get a little older? I said, well, I think I'd like to act. And he said, hey. And that's Tom, in case you didn't know. So I said, I think I'd like to act. And he says, you want to act? And I said, yeah. He says, you don't want to direct? And I said, no, I think I really want to act. And he said, well, as it just happens, Carnegie Mellon University's drama program and Point Park College at the time's drama program has just started a high school for the performing arts over in Oakland. And he says, I know the people that started it. If you want, I'll put in a good word for you, and I'll give you the number to call. And true to his word, he came walking back to the van about 2 hours later with an index card with the guy's name and a phone number. And I called the guy up right away, and about a week later, actually after we shot, I went down and auditioned for him, and George had already called them, and I got right in. And so I did my senior year at a place called McKee Place High School for the Performing Arts. And then with a little help from George, I think, a lot of help probably, I got into Carnegie Mellon University's drama program. And then from there on, I ended up taking 7 movies in 6 years. So that all goes back to just being there on the Knightriders set, sitting in the back of a van, and George walking up with a sandwich for me.
We want to welcome King Tom Savini, who played King Morgan.
Sorry, don't you hate people that arrive at the party late just to get attention, That's not what I'm doing.
We were telling stories about the Ramada.
I'm sure Marty told you all the stories about us at the Ramada, right? But not all. Okay. Do you know about did they talk about the flying zucchini?
We haven't covered that yet.
You have not?
No, not yet. Cover that.
He's here. Nicky Tallow. Where is he? Is he in the audience?
He's in Hall B.
Okay. Anyway, he was the flying zucchini brother. We would stuff him in a garbage bag on the diving board, seal it, push it into the pool, and he would escape from it. question.
Tom, we heard about the laser tag.
Remember the elevator door was never scored.
That was the squirt
Wait,
gun,
wait,
that
wait,
wasn't
wait.
the laser.
Now, you got to understand this. Since there's like 5 of them with squirt guns. The thing opens and they're all squirting me. It's like 5 against 1. I don't even have a weapon. Not fair.
That's your fault.
Not fair.
That was squirt the pretty boy.
Yeah, well, that was the idea. You know. Or face, as I was called.
That's right. That was your nickname, the face.
In the elevator.
Yeah, I mean, we were just
Hey, Gary, well, there's one person in the cast that nobody has mentioned at all yet. And I'm just wondering, was like he in his room this entire time? And that's Ed.
No, Ed was around. Ed's kind of a hermit anyway. I mean, in his way, he's a very private person. That's a good way to put it. So Ed had his own thing going. I'm not going to tell you what that was, but he had his own thing going. But I probably spent more time with Ed than even you, Tom. I mean, I hung out with Ed and Donald Rubinstein, who was a composer and played a minstrel and everything. So we were kind of pals and always had our own little private parties going other places, which I'm not going to tell you about either.
It was a lot of people. I mean, it broke up into little groups that, you know.
It was groups
It was
because
groups of people.
Yeah.
we had our own clique.
Yeah.
You know, me and the watermelon and the mace, and we're gonna knock you out of that seat, you know, big boy.
all that stuff.
So we were our own little group, and you and Ed were like another group.
That's so
Yeah.
true, yeah.
Yeah, the Black Knights kind of hung together off the set too.
It wasn't purposeful, it just kind of like shook out that.
Yeah, it did.
That was one question I had for you, Gary, and I think, Marty, it might have been something you mentioned on one of our shows, that Ed held like Knights of the Round Table meetings after hours. Do you recall that at all, and can you speak to that?
No. Either that or I was so drunk or something. No, we didn't do that, no. But we got together occasionally and I don't think
We did it as Knights.
we
I've
ever
heard this
spoke-
question before.
Oh, you know what? I don't think
Did
you were
we actually
invited.
do the have meetings?
Yes,
Ed
yes,
have
we
meetings?
did have meetings. We did.
We definitely did.
We didn't invite you.
That's
No, we got together because
we discuss things sometimes.
yeah, we did sometimes.
we needed some way to dislike Ed because we, as characters, were kind of against him, wanted him gone. So he was trying to quit smoking. So that we said, that's it. If we catch you smoking, and we did catch him smoking, so that's method acting, how we hated him.
Ed still smokes.
Of course he does.
It didn't work. It was bad plan, terrible plan.
Well, I do kind of remember getting together and discussing at one point, but it wasn't like something we did a lot of. Like, you know, we had an idea which way we were going to go, who was with who in the film, and I think, you know, Tom and the Black Knights were kind of one group, and Ed and I was kind of like this Lancelot to King Arthur sort of thing. So that was kind of implicit in what we were trying to do. I think. We discussed it, but it's not something we met on every day or we didn't talk. We did our own individual actor work, I think, pretty much by ourselves.
Hey, like Lancelot, did you end up with the Queen? I don't mean for real. I mean, you know,
They asked me this question last night at the bar, and I didn't remember. They said you did. I said I did.
Yes, you did.
See, lucky me. But only because it died. You know, I didn't like winter away.
No, you took it first. Then he died. Yes.
Yeah, that's why he killed
You
himself,
take
because
her.
of
I mean,
you.
When he becomes the king, she gets off the crown, walks down, jumps on your bike. Then he and
Yeah,
Albert,
that's right.
then Ed and Albert go on the road,
God,
and then Ed buys it in the front of the
And you
truck.
dumped
So
Patty
it's your
Coleman,
fault.
so she probably killed herself too.
Because of you, yes.
Oh my God.
On your bike.
Oh my God. I'm so embarrassed.
a nice guy.
On several
Thank you,
levels.
Captain Stavrakis.
This is a new movie that I'm writing.
So Gary,
Marty wrote a sequel to Knight Riders. You still have it?
Lost in the earthquake, but I may have 1 or 2 copies left. So, yeah.
Anybody want to see a sequel to Knight Riders?
I'll write it again if I have to.
Hey, my armor still fits me.
Yeah, pretty much. Walkers. Well, Taso.
Well, Ed could come. I mean, Ed's spirit could come back. He's still around. You're still around. I'm here. He's here. He's here. Taso's here.
I might even get some speaking lines this time.
This time you may talk.
That's right.
We only need about $50 million.
You should have had one line at the end of Knight Riders.
Hey, I had to be the stoic Native American.
Gary, did George give you any sort of feedback or insight into your character? What kind of relationship did you have with developing the character of Alan with George?
Well, you know what, I realized even in the beginning of the shooting that I was kind of there as a romantic, and bring some character, but also to bring some humor into the movie, because there's not a lot of humor in it. There are some spots where it's in the movie, so.
Yeah, you were hilarious.
But I was supposed to be like this romantic guy, which I got. But also there were spots where, you know, we dropped a motorcycle on my leg. You know, we kind of made that up to go just it's slapstick, but it brings a little bit of humor. So as far as that goes, the relationship between me and Patty Tallman's character was really one of between. I guess Tom, you had an arrow, and Ed had, of course, he had Amy's character. So the only time I ever really discussed it with George, I liked what I was doing, but the only time I discussed it is when I dropped Patty off at her parents' house, and I say, I'm sorry, you know, you gotta go. And I said to George, I said, you know, I'm not sure he's really sorry. I should be sorry here. And he said, no, you're sorry. And I went, okay.
That's what you did with George.
And I was sorry. That's what I played it. So other than that, not really so much. I kind of like what I was doing. What's that?
Is that the last?
That's last we see of Patty. Yeah. Yeah.
But she goes off and gets a crap beat out, supposedly.
She killed herself because of you.
we're just letting all this guilt on Gary. George, just as a director, never really gave you a lot of direction, unless, like that moment, you were going too far abeam of where you were supposed to be. He kind of let us find our way as characters, which was really kind of cool. And if he wanted something specific, he would let you know. But as long as it was working, he let it go, you know. Tom, you had the most emotional stuff. Did he guide you along the way?
No, well, no, the crowning scene was the most emotional thing. We didn't know that was going to happen, so they said, you know, get ready for it. That was the most emotional thing. But, you know, in the movie when the jousting is over and everybody's relaxing, Ken Foray is walking off with 2 babes, and Taso and I are fencing. We're practicing fencing. Well, he hit me on the top of the head with a real metal sword, and blood is coming down my face. And that's the first time George ever screamed at me in anger that I'm one of the leads and I can't get hurt, and, you know, blood is coming down. So that's the only time George ever yelled at me.
Gary, I'll start this question with you. What were your initial thoughts on seeing Knightriders as a finished film?
I like it. I mean, I went to the dailies pretty much every day. Every day you could see the work you had done the day before. So I kind of had an idea how it was going to visually look and how the performances were growing. So when I saw the final cut, I think I went to the opening. I went to the opening in Los Angeles, and I went to the opening in New York. So it didn't surprise me. It looked exactly like I thought it was going to come out. And in Los Angeles, there was a lot of people there. And I remember Sally Field was sitting right in front of me. And I said, the stunts are crazy, this thing. The stunt guys, we should talk about them at some point. Because I saw guys do things, I went, that way, they take a mace and throw it into the front wheel of the motorcycle and do a front flip. They literally took a cable and tied it to the front fork of the motorcycle, and the stuntman got on it and drove fast. And when they got to the end of the cable, the other end of the cable was hooked on a tree. You know what happened? The thing just went like that, and he went to the hospital. So, I'm watching this movie in Los Angeles, and my agent was sitting right next to me, and I didn't know Sally Field was in front of me. And I said, now Sally Field, I think, was married to Burt Reynolds at the time. And I said to my agent, you'd never see a stunt like that in a Burt Reynolds movie. And Sally Fields literally turned around and looked me right in the face. She was right there. If the ground would have opened up and I could have fallen in, I would have been really happy. So that's really my memory of the Los Angeles movie. But the movie looked like pretty much what I expected it to be.
That was really nice. We don't realize it until now. Any one of us could have walked in to watch the dailies. There was no secret. There was no privacy. If we wanted to, George let us in. He let me in the editing room while he was editing.
Yeah,
sit there and watch it for an hour.
Albert, same question. What did you think when you saw the final film?
Well, I was working on a guest ranch in Tucson, Arizona.
I don't think they let Indians into the movie theater.
I kind of was shocked more than anything else, as I am now, because it's 40 years later. I didn't even think anybody remembered this movie, much less, seeing all of you here now is even more shocking. But I thought it was okay, I was hoping to be a star, but c'est la vie.
You should have said something.
You could have gone on to do stuff like that.
Well,
It's a great character.
I just didn't want to move to Los Angeles. That was the main thing, because then I would have had to go through the auditions, and I'm somewhat shy sometimes,
Trudy, following up with something Gary said, did you work with the motorcycles? Did you work with the stunt crew at all? Did you do much with them?
Yes, they were in, as I said, basically going around in circles, and they did a lot of the hard things that we were supposed to do, and because they were trained at it, they didn't want us to get killed. So I don't think we had insurance, but we had to. A lot of the times when we went around, we had to make sure that we were positioned in a certain way so we got on camera. So we had to joust, if you will, to get into the positions that we were supposed to be. And once again, we were playful with each other. Nobody wanted to hurt each other, but it was playful. But it was like, I got to be there, and you got to get out of the way. So I was on when they did the filming of a lot of the stunts, and they were simply amazing. They had one in particular. There was a lake there where we were filming, and they had one of the fellas. They had a bike rig. Gary Davis. They had the bike rig that he went up a ramp, and the bike, as he went out into the middle of the air to go into the lake, the bike split in half, and the whole bike just split right in half. And I think they anchored it to the back part of it with the chain. In the front part, he kept going with the front part and kept on flying. And the nice part about it is whenever a stunt was done, that's the one I mainly remember because that was so awesome. But the nice part about it is that when everybody was done, they would applaud for each other. Everybody was so supportive. It was nice.
All right, at about 10 of the hour, so we wanted to open up questions. Does anybody in the office? Does anybody in the audience have any questions?
Going to set a microphone stand up over here. If you have a question, right here's the place to do it.
So this question's for Gary. It's really cool to have you here. I love you in the movie. So you said a lot of times you could do probably some of the weapon stuff, and they took you a lot out of some of the fun scenes. But that was you in the woods with Patty Tallman, right? You got to be in that fun scene, right?
Well, thanks, by the way. But the reason they didn't let me handle the weapons was he got hit in the head and got yelled at. So, but yeah, that was me. And unfortunately, at the time, that was Taso's girlfriend. Don't forget. So I didn't look at anything I wasn't supposed to look at. I didn't even pay attention. I just did my thing. I stood up and went like, "It's cold. I'm going to put some pants on." So that's my memory of it. But again, it was an attempt at humor. That was the whole idea.
Is this your real hair?
It's my hair. It's my real hair.
People have been asking you that all weekend.
No, it's my real hair, and my beard is gray. I don't know.
Any other questions?
Oh, well, great. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you.
Yeah, so again, thank you guys for attending another Knightriders panel. This has been really fun. This is a film that's really resonated with fans over the last couple of years, and it's a wonderful film. The camaraderie and the friendship shows through on screen all the time. Thank you guys so very much for doing this. Thank you for being a part of Knightriders. Thank you for being here. Please come see everybody. All see. We'll be hanging out the rest of the day and the rest of the weekend. And thank you guys very much.